Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Middle West podcast. We have a roundtable discussion today. I'm joined by my co-hosts Asad Hussain.
Assalamu alaikum.
And Abdul Sami Arjumand.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
And we're also joined by a guest host today, my other half, Lina Farhat.
Assalamu alaikum.
And in case you haven't recognized my voice already, my name's Taqib Musa. So we're talking a little bit about some of the current events. Just realized it sounded really narcissistic when I said, "Oh, you should recognize my voice." But anyway,
it's the
characteristic.
It's the Americanness coming out again. It's the Americanness coming out.
I really think American listeners will get offended by how much we hate on them.
That's fine. They get that from the Brits all the time.
Well, because they're a colony. But today we're talking about, today's a round table. We're going to discuss a little bit of the New Zealand mosque massacre, some thoughts on that, talk about Abdul Sami's recent charity trip to Lebanon, and see where the conversation takes us, which will probably be cars. Hopefully not. Inshallah. Okay, so start off, Abdul Sami, you went to Lebanon recently. You're telling us about Saida and different cities and...
Yeah, so alhamdulillah, I had the great opportunity to go to Lebanon. It was with the charity called Human Aid.
Never heard of it.
But
shout out to Human Aid.
Shout out to Human Aid for giving me this opportunity. Alhamdulillah, I managed to raise. Well, the target was £5,000, but so far only £3,000 raised.
Are you still collecting though?
I'm still collecting. Yeah.
Is there a deadline or?
So the deadline technically is the 25th of May because that's when the page closes. Because they give you one year to fundraise. But because of the projects are ongoing projects, so technically I can still carry on fundraising, inshallah. Please do.
What sort of projects are they?
So they have various different projects sponsoring orphans for education. One of the main projects that they have is a shelter in Saida. It's called Darus Salam. It houses about 35 widows and orphans, i.e. 35 families. And it's just, taking care of the rent, the electricity, cleaning supplies, as well as activities for the widows as well while the kids are going to school. So genuinely, it's just a lot of good work that these guys are doing in Lebanon. On top of the emergency kind of work that they do on the borders as well in Bekaa Valley and in as well. Where is it? It starts with A. I forgot.
Arsal.
I can't help you.
Arsal, yes, in Arsal. We were supposed to go to Arsal, but we couldn't go to Arsal. But yeah, so we went to...
Why couldn't you go?
It was a red zone, unfortunately.
I nearly got kidnapped in Arsal.
That's why I didn't go.
That's an interesting story. So are we agreeing that Asad is braver than Abdul Sami?
No. So the local charity on the ground, they told us not to go. They said that it's advised not to go.
Who are your partners in Lebanon?
ISWA. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. They've also got another partner charity called Riaya. If that's
where are they based?
They're based in Saida.
Okay.
Funnily enough, guess who knows them? Guess who knows them really well?
I don't know.
Hazem Turk.
Hazem Turk. Shout out to Hazem Turk, great guy. He moved to Doha.
Yeah, so if you're listening, Hazem, shout out to you somehow. Anywho, so
you fundraised and mashallah, the project sounds great. What do you go to do? Because I know I think you've been to do some charity work as well. So what kind of what kind of stuff do you do there?
So the two main cities we went to were Saida and Bekaa Valley, two very different places. In Bekaa Valley, you see a lot of the refugees who just kind of cross the border. They're living in refugee camps. Literally, it's just campsite after campsite where it's just, people who have just about managed to get through the borders and who are living the most basic of lifestyles. When I say basic, they're fortunate just to have the bare necessities such as basic medication, having a blanket to cover themselves during the winter. People who struggle to find any kind of form of a living. They can't afford to work in Lebanon, they can't afford to live in Lebanon, and they just have to resort to the refugee camps. And
so they're all Syrians?
They're all Syrian, every single one.
You got a lot of Palestinian refugees as well.
Okay, and they've been there for ages.
A long time.
But what do you go and do?
So a lot of charities go there and they deliver emergency aid, because this is where most of the emergency aid is needed, because these are the people who are genuinely not looked after. The way these shelters are generally looked after is just by local charities on the ground, where they have one person who's supervising, but the maintenance isn't really all that. So a lot of the times when people go over there, it's to deliver emergency aid. During the winter, giving them blankets, clothing, food, assisting with the electricity when they can. A lot of times, due to weather conditions, these places get flooded. In fact, when I went there,
do you actually take the stuff with you? Is that why you're there? Like, why can't a Lebanese volunteer do that?
So that's what they do. So when we go, we just go there to observe some of the work that's actually happening. So when we went there, we actually spoke to the refugees themselves. We met with different families. We asked them about the conditions and about their journey and their experiences. And I think that was one of the most remarkable things about this trip, when you actually go and meet the people, we actually speak to them and hear out their stories. You get amazed by how thankful you have to be in terms of these guys a lot of these people are just so grateful that they've kind of made it across with the families or with all limbs. Being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the smallest of things, and it makes you realize how the things that in your life that you have, the problems that you go through, how insignificant they are compared to the problems that these people go through. People who've witnessed family members being persecuted, a lot of male family members been imprisoned, being tortured, and unfortunately some killed. And not just being killed, the way that they informed us that they're being killed. Sometimes, like a certificate from the army, once they, in prison, the army sends them a certificate saying your husband has passed away, or your father has been killed, or whatnot. And a lot of the times, they cover up, because a lot of times people actually get killed due to the torture, but they have to make up things such as or due to this disease or that disease.
Because they don't want to get in trouble.
Exactly.
But okay, so I'm being really cynical / skeptical here, but I know that like when teenagers go off, like it is common here in schools and stuff, they go off to Africa to help build a school or something. It always feels a bit like, how much do they actually achieve? It seems more like an experience that they have, rather than they're actually helping on the ground. And I assume that the charities are sponsoring some people to go down. I know that some people, like I know Lena, you've mentioned some people go as like dentists or something, so they actually provide like free healthcare or like a clinic or something, and they set that up.
This thing called Gap Medics or something like that.
Yeah. Or like they go with like MSF, which is like Medis.
There are loads of organisations out there.
But the whole thing. So what how can a charity justify sending someone just to observe it?
So it wasn't that. I don't know about Abdusami, but mine wasn't just observing. So we went there. I went with an uncle from Birmingham, from Alam Rock, Uncle Shabir. He'd been going for 20 years to Lebanon. He was a guy who basically 20 years ago he wasn't part of UKM, but he wanted to go and do work in these kind of countries because he'd seen this is when the Palestinian conflict was going on when it was at its peak, and he got backing from UKM, and that's how he joined UKM. And then he joined the relief wing of UKM, and they sent him on missions every year.
So he kind of did the groundwork of setting everything up.
So I remember. So he's basically gone there to support the orphan projects and war wounded projects. So he's got a war wounded project. That's his project. He started it from scratch. And a lot of the people who he basically brings, someone's war wounded, they fund them to come to the UK for treatment, and then they have a hostel in a UKM hostel in Birmingham, where they keep them for the duration of the treatment.
That's brilliant.
So we met one of them, and she calls him Dad. She's 30 years old. She's got a kid. She's got a husband, but she calls him Dad because he saved her life. So we went there to look for other opportunities for war wounded children, and the places.
How does that work in terms of asylum and whatnot? By the way, if you bring somebody across for medical treatment,
I don't know the intricacies of it, but essentially you're not bringing them across to be permanent residents or anything like that.
Right, so just treatment
It's
and
just
then
treatment.
to send back,
Yeah.
rehabilitate them and then
basically.
send them back.
So he's still based in the UK, but he brings people over to the UK, and
he's been everywhere. And so the time we went to, so we stayed in Beirut, we went to Tripoli, we went to Saida, we went to Arsal, we went to Bekaa Valley as well, and places like Arsal, etc., and the refugee camps. That's where we're looking for the people we can take back and potential projects in the future.
But what treatment would necessitate them coming here and not be treated in Lebanon? Because they do have some good hospitals in Lebanon.
And also, why do they need just people? Like, why? I would assume they need like a team of doctors. I know I sound really cynical here of all of these projects, but like, why do they need to send just a random guy from the UK? Why can't they just rely on local volunteers?
So what it is basically is the work that UKM does in Lebanon and other countries as well, like Jordan, Pakistan, etc. it's not always they bring them to the UK. Sometimes they treat them there. But in the extreme cases,
Perhaps
in terms
there
of
are these,
funding,
yeah,
you bring them over here. So the woman we met, even though she's 30 years old, you still see her scars on her face. And with all the skin grafts that they use, because they use a lot of skin from her thighs as well to cover her face. It's horrible because she showed me pictures of before, burnt beyond recognition. The nose is gone. You know, this is serious surgery. That's one of the things we did. Another thing we did was medical pop-up camps in the refugee camps, where we come and we take doctors and dentists.
So
and
that's
nurses.
offering the service.
Yeah.
So that answers your question, I guess.
And UKM pays for all of it. And we want to be there to observe it as well. But I also when I went, we were making a documentary for Islam Channel. That's why we went as well. For fundraising for Ramadan. So when we show it, when you have fundraising, you have Ramadan. And he said, okay, we're going to go to our Lebanon appeal. And then they show the documentary and then, you know.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of fundraising value to it. 'Cause
Yeah, so that's one thing actually we did as well. One of the purposes so there are two purposes for meeting, families over there and the refugees over there. Number one is for us to actually try to connect with them, from a personal point of view, where we actually, try and experience, as much as we can from them and try and, get to know them and the problems that they've gone through and their travels, the journey that the journey that they made across. But the second thing is also about the fundraising element of it. So we interviewed about 15 different families, and we're going to be writing up about 15 different case studies. That's going to be used, especially during Ramadan. So starting to prepare for Ramadan from now. So the idea is that every day we're going to be releasing a different case study. So for example, this is the family of Abu Muhammad, this is the family of Abu Ahmed, or this is the family of Jihad, or whatever or not. That's the other aspect of the reason why we actually went. But the main reason was, so we spent about a couple of days in Bekaa Valley, and then the rest of the days we spent in Saida, because the key project that Humanity are doing over there is the Darus Salam shelter. So we went there for about 3 more days in Saida, and we spent time in the shelter. We were giving out gifts to the children and to the widows, playing with the children. And it's just an amazing moment, is that we got out of the car and stepped inside the playground, the kids just ran towards us because they recognize the Humanity logo, because the Humanity logo is all over the place, and they treat us as if though we're like the fathers of these children. They're like, come play with us. This. They just want so much of you. First thing they say, "Assalamu alaikum." It's like little cute kids just saying, take pictures. And then, you can see the jealousy within the little kids sometimes. It's just so cute to see, one kid's saying, can you just take a picture of you and me, just you and me, no other kids. And it's just...
I think just 2 things to add to that. I think, firstly, just kind of as a counter question to what do we get out of it, it's what do they get out of it as well? Just knowing that they're not alone and they're not forgotten, because, the Syrian crisis has been, ongoing for a very long time, and they're spread out through, the Syrian refugees are spread out through Lebanon. Those that are well off, they're able to secure jobs, a shelter, but there are multiple people that are still in tents. When I went to Lebanon following the war in Syria, it was my first year after it, and I hadn't been to Lebanon for about 7 years before that. So when I went, when we go, my mother's from the north, a place called Kusha, which is in Akkar, which is about half an hour away from Tripoli, very close to the Syrian border. So when we went, I literally, my jaw was just dropping, and we were driving past. I was like, what's happened to this place? And I was driving with my cousin, and she laughed at me because she was like, this is normal, get used to it. And they were laughing at me for finding this very difficult to look at, but there were literally people in streets in these kind of haphazard tents, barely tents, just on a random streets, driving down the local road and seeing a tent there. How often do we see that? And then we had all these local shops, and my grandfather owned the shop, and that they were being basically garages, essentially, is where they'd open the shops, and they were being used as homes for families of 10. Exactly. And the thing is, it's so easy for them to be forgotten. So the fact that I know that there's this whole white savior complex that, people blame charity workers for having, but or brown in this case, whatever. But I think actually they they appreciate the acknowledgement and not being forgotten. I think that's a big thing.
This one family we went to see. I'm going to give a shout out just that you guys can make dua for him. for the family. So Abu Muhammad, his family, there's a little baby, Muhammad, barely just over 1 year old. And he's got a bit of a tumor on his right hand side. And even just right now, yesterday I got a text from the local charity saying, "Oh, his health is getting worse." So he's got a tumor on the right hand side and of his head, and the doctors haven't given him much time to live. So we were just speaking to him about his story. How was life beforehand, before the war? How's life? Now, how's every day your day-to-day living? What do you do? What do you get up to? And then we were asking him, "Oh, do you have any kind of message to the West or any kind of nasiha for us?" And he's like, "You guys are amazing. You guys are doing so much for us. You guys are, because of you guys, we're getting this kind of aid that we're getting. We're getting this kind of looking after because you guys are doing all this fundraising for us. And you guys are, and things we know for a fact, and people who are listening right now, you guys know for a fact that you're not doing enough. We're not making enough dua. We're not, nearly donating enough. We're not nearly thinking about these people enough." But this one family, this Abu Muhammad, he was just so grateful. He was just saying, "You guys are amazing. You guys are doing so much work for us, and I'm so grateful that you guys came here just to visit us, just to see us, and it makes our days so much better." And that's kind of a general theme amongst these kind of refugees. And there's a difference, by the way, in terms of some of the refugees. In Bekaa Valley, you find that these are the people who are a bit more, they had jobs in agriculture, farming, this, that, low-skilled kind of migrants. Migrants. It's because of you. I'm looking at yes, I thought migrants. Sorry, this...
just such a serious, beautiful topic, and you have to just...
sorry.
Just bring in here.
But yeah, not that highly skilled, not teachers, not engineers. And these are the people who struggle to find jobs over there. So that's why they resort to the refugee camps, because it's basically free. And one person we asked, how is life over here? He was like, "Taht al-sifr." It's below zero. It's absolutely atrocious. And the one thing that he likes most out of it is the fact that when he does see people from the West coming over, it breaks that monotony. And it also kind of gives them hope that the ummah around, the worldwide ummah is actually thinking of them. So there is that value, added where when we do go and see them, that these guys do genuinely appreciate it, and these guys actually, they all treated us like amazing guests. They gave us coffee, they gave us tea. Yeah. Sometimes they gave us two teas and 2 coffees, and gave us some treats, this, that, and it's like these people are living in tents,
They're generous.
Ridiculously
with
generous.
The shelter, do the refugees have to pay a minimal fee for that, or is it free of charge?
So the shelters, the refugees, is completely the charity itself pays the rent for the building. So there's the owner of the building, some rich Lebanese guy probably, and so the way it works is that if you're a widow, you send an application in, and there's an interview process. Unfortunately, because it's only for widows. You do have a lot of women who do have their husbands, but they try and apply, but they try and be a bit sneaky and stuff. So they have a very, very rigorous kind of application process. And once they get accepted, everything is basically taken care of for them. The rent's taken care of, their children's education, basic medication, and basic needs. So it's basically all taken care of.
Okay, exactly. But that's something that's always kind of, because I know that they're being so generous and all that, and I always find with that is that, okay, they're being so generous, they're giving you 2 cups of tea out of the 5 they had, but why are you there? And I guess the kind of...
So I think a lot of the time people think that charity work, like you're just saying now, is quite easy. You just go there, you meet a couple of people and you fly back.
Take a few pictures.
When you go there, one example is with Uncle Shabir, with Arsal. It's a UN registered refugee camp, so it's thousands of people there. If you look at it from the hill.
And this is the one he's established, has now grown.
No.
Oh,
this is a UN refugee camp.
Okay.
This is the red zone one that he was talking about.
In Arsal.
Arsal, yeah. So it's on the border of Syria. So you got a lot of ISIS families, and then the members leak over to see them.
Do you actually? Because this is something.
You do.
Hear. Okay.
So what you have is members of Daesh or other groups in Syria. They send their families to be safe in the refugee camps on the border, and they visit them because the border's not controlled. There's no wall, there's no fencing, nothing. You just have soldiers patrolling, and you have stop points, etc. So when you're going there to look for potential candidates for treatment, etc., then everyone's coming up to you, but you have to be careful. So one example is a boy came up to Uncle Shabir. So the camera crew's in the tent, they're filming with the family, And I'm standing outside with Uncle Shabir. We're talking about what we're going to do next. There's a family up there we're going to visit where there's a little girl who's paralysed, and we're going to go see her. And we're talking, and a boy comes up to us, and he can't speak much English. Uncle Shabir can speak Arabic though, and he's speaking with him. And he pulls his shirt up, and he's got a bullet wound under here. But then he's also got a bullet wound on his shoulder, and he's rotted all the way down his arm, up to his elbow. So everything's become rot because he hasn't treated it. It's become infected. Okay. And I'm thinking, because I'm naive, because this is the first time I'm going there, because I've been plenty of times. I'm naive thinking, okay, we can potentially put this guy down on the list. And then Uncle Shabir doesn't seem interested. So I pulled him to the side later. I said, why were you interested? He goes, if you're bringing people to the UK, this guy was 19 years old, around 19. He goes, boys who are 19 years old or prime fighting age will not be allowed in the country. Because they'll assume the wound, for example, was a wound in fighting.
But was it or not? So that's surely...
No, but that's the thing. They don't trust him. Well, you never see refugees of that age coming to the country. Syrian families that come to the country...
Because he could just as easily have just been, you know...
He could have. That's a fact.
He could have been shot on the street.
You're looking at it objectively, isn't it? You just... In terms of war, Prophet said this, war is deception, and it works both ways. You don't really know.
But you also... Because you said there's ISIS fighters there, which I mean...
No, they don't stay in the camps. They visit
Yeah.
families,
So ISIS fighter families are there, but... Or I'm sure they're coming and going.
Yeah.
What kind of... I mean, I see your point in that, but there's no ISIS territory bordering Arsal, is there? Because I thought they were reduced to...
No, there's no ISIS territory bordering Arsal.
Yeah, so then how are the fighters coming and going?
What do you mean?
Well, so they come... Because they now control, like a few kilometers?
You're assuming that members of ISIS can only move around freely in ISIS-controlled territory. They cannot. They move around freely around the country. How do you think
even now when they've become so...
Of course, yeah.
So confined?
Because a lot of them have escaped from the strongholds, and they scattered around.
So
more so back then.
But then are... I mean, would you say that these that Western governments are kind of correct in being so cautious about it?
I'm not going to have an opinion on that. I don't really know, to be honest with you. But for example, was an issue of, can we do it as a charity? We still have to safeguard the charity first and foremost. So people who are fighting ages, 19 and 20-year-olds, young lads, regardless of whether the injuries they got were from actual war, was fighting with the Syrian authorities, it doesn't matter.
That's marginalising that age group that decide not to fight with ISIS.
Basically.
You know,
they're not considered the most vulnerable group because
basically, you see families come to the country,
children.
Syrian families that come to the country, for example. You think about it now. Most of them are parents with their young kids.
Yeah.
Rarely you see teenagers, but you do see teenagers.
Could you not facilitate them getting treated locally in that circumstance?
You can, but refugees in Arsal are not allowed to leave the area. So when you go in there, this is a funny thing we had. In the morning, we were going to Arsal. Shabir said to everyone, "All right, guys, take your passports with you." I was in the bathroom. I didn't hear him. I've told you already, haven't I? I'm sure I mentioned this.
I think you mentioned it, yeah.
I didn't hear him. We're on there. So we've gotten there at Arsal, and there's checkpoints. And Shabir's like, "Okay, everyone, take your passports out." I'm like, "What?" And this is like, it's a long way from Beirut because you're going straight across the country.
Who's guarding those checkpoints?
Lebanese soldiers.
Lebanese soldiers, yeah? Okay.
So not Hezbollah, Lebanese authorities. So the government. And he goes, "Pull your passports out." And I looked at him and said, "Uncle, don't say that to me. I forgot my passport. You didn't tell me." And he dropped, his face dropped. Luckily, we got in because the guy who's given us, the guide from the other charity in Lebanon, he talked to the guards a bit, it's fine. But what they did was, I noticed, was they opened the car and they checked around the car. And then when they came back out, they did a 15-minute search of the car because sometimes the refugees jump in the car because they're not allowed outside and inside. It's basically like it's an open-air prison. It's like Gaza, innit?
And there's no, I'm assuming there's no work or anything, work opportunities or anything like that?
No, it's an entire refugee camp. It's not a town.
What's the population of the camp in Al-Bahr?
It's in its thousands.
So I was speaking to the local charity over there, and when they were trying to give the whole kind of synopsis of the whole situation, and why a lot of people are struggling to find jobs in Lebanon, for example, in terms of the Syrians, aside from the legal issues, they were like talking about even the Lebanese context. So it's a country that has a population of 3 million or so Lebanese, another 1.5 million Palestinian refugees, and another 500,000 Syrian refugees. So it kind of shows you how strained the country is, specifically after the fact that it's coming out of civil war. So the country itself is already strained, and being, having taken Palestinian refugees from, all that time since the war, since the whole Israeli conflict began. And now with the Syrian situation, it's really, the situation, unfortunately, is very bleak.
I mean, countries like Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, they've done the most. And even, I know people go after the Gulf countries the most, but I think personally, from Saudi Arabia, from what I know, we could see that people had joined their relatives and stuff like that. Like, they don't have a formal refugee status, but they would have residence permits, and they all came in. If you had a relative or something, they made it easy.
Because when the UN, when you report refugee statuses to the organisation like the UN, you have to report them as refugees. A lot of refugees that went there, technically, they didn't go as refugees.
They don't go as refugees because they went to visit their families. But
Arsal, 10,000 people in Arsal.
10,000 people, and they're not allowed to. They don't have the freedom to go out or go in, and they rely on aid. Is that right?
Yeah.
Just to add on to the question of or your point about the population. That same visit when I went to Lebanon after the Syrian war, I was speaking to a lot of families. So a lot of my family live in a village, and not all of them are well off. Some of them, alhamdulillah, are very comfortable. Others not so comfortable. And a lot of the perspectives that I was listening to, and I was very upset to hear, was that they were angry with the fact that there are so many Syrian refugees. I heard so because they say that you have companies that instead of hiring, and a lot of Lebanese youth are struggling to find jobs, and a lot of them, and this is probably an unfair statement, but they put it down to the fact that there are so many Syrian and Palestinian refugees because a lot of Lebanese companies are hiring 2 Syrians for the price of 1 Lebanese person, and it's building that sort of hatred, unfortunately. And I was like, how could you think that, blah blah blah. And it's so easy for me to say that, right, because I'm not in that situation. But for people again who haven't got necessarily a lot of, they haven't got higher education, they rely on these sort of local jobs that they can't get because they're being given air quotes to to Syrian refugees. So there's that tension that's building up there as well.
That stems. So we were speaking to the charity we were there with, the partner charity, and they said the exact same thing, where you have Lebanese people who are actually, in the UK we have this, we have communities that think, they're taking our jobs, this and that. It's actually happening in Lebanon. And when British people go over there and we hear this from the Lebanese people, we think the exact same thing that we think here as well. You know what I mean? Racist.
So everyone gets affected by something that's happening to their immediate, it's their livelihood too, and obviously it's a tough situation for Lebanon to be in. Everybody has to sacrifice. But once you're in that situation, I know in Karachi, especially in Karachi, because a lot of Afghan refugees came and then made Karachi their home because it's the economic hub of Pakistan, and there'd be rhetoric like that of all these refugees are coming in and the Talibanization of Karachi is taking place and they're terrorists and this and that. And obviously there's a problem because the country is already poor. It's the same case with many of these countries, right? Like Lebanon struggles with services, Pakistan struggles with services. Karachi is already a bit overcrowded. Yeah. Just a bit of an understatement. But it's struggling to cope with that, and it's becoming larger, all those things. So I think people get affected by their...
I think the one thing that I noticed about all these Syrian refugees was their mentality, which is that there's not a single Syrian refugee I've ever met that doesn't want to go back to Syria. Mm-hmm. Every single Syrian refugee, whether it be in Europe, whether it be in Turkey, whether it be in Lebanon, they all have a vision of going back to Syria, whether it be in the different ways. Unfortunately, some who are very unfortunate, who are currently living in the refugee camps, for them, when they describe their day-to-day lives, they're like, it was saadi. It's normal. It's just like, wake up in the morning, wait for the sun to set, go to sleep, wait for the next day. And because they can't find anything there, and they believe that their livelihood belongs into Syria.
The local community,
so they're just speaking. Basically, they're just waiting for to go back. And then when we ask, Damascus is safe now. It's been declared safe by the regime, and in fact, much of Syria is now pretty much quote unquote safe. So we asked them, why don't you go back? And they're like, the moment we go back, we know for a fact that the army is going to arrest us.
It's not safe for them.
It's not safe for them.
No,
because these people are genuinely innocent. They've never planned or plotted against the regime. They just want to get on with their day-to-day lives. But unfortunately...
not that plotting against the regime is a problem, because the regime was pretty evil.
I think plotting is a very...
Here.
Sorry?
We're remaining PC.
No, but I think plotting is a very... like very vague term. Like a lot of the refugees
but
were
all get arrested for anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So that goes actually to my second kind of type of the kind of refugees. So inside there, you have a bit more of the people who are trying to actually kind of build themselves properly and attempt to make a living, at least temporarily. And we met a few of so the charity sponsored a few of the orphans as well, and we met some of the head teachers of some of the schools. And one of the head teachers, she was telling us, her name was Fatima. She's very much a lively character, mashallah, like one of those strong women, strong feminine kind of characters. And she was saying that this, the reason why it's not safe for her to be in Syria is because she's educated. Anybody who's educated, they're going to come after them, because these are people who are intelligent enough to know that it's not a fair country, or it's a very kind of tyrannical rule. And these are the kind of people who. So she's a head teacher, and the reason why her school's name is the Garden of forgot the name actually, to be honest. I'll get back to you by the end of it. I'll check on my phone right now. But it kind of resonated in the vision of that she had for the school, which is that she wanted. It's a Syrian-only school in terms of the teachers are all Syrian, the kids are all Syrian, and her kind of vision is that I want to make sure that these kids they grow up as skilled people, educated people who can go back and rebuild Syria, and that's all she wants. And that's the mentality that a lot of these people have. We want to go back and rebuild Syria, and that's what's really disheartening sometimes that you find.
And unfortunately, like Lebanon doesn't have a system where it's integrating. It's creating sort of a gypsy culture where people are very isolated in their communities, and it builds up the resentment and the lack of understanding between the communities. And Lebanon just simply doesn't have the power to unfortunately organize itself in a way where it looks into integration programs. I'm not obviously fully aware of everything that's out there, and I might be wrong, but I think the sheer number just makes it too difficult.
I think when we talk about the Lebanese communities, I think when we're speaking about how some might say they're taking our jobs, etc. Looking on the bright side, the communities that surround the refugee camps, the small ones or the big ones, they're actually quite supportive of the refugees. In terms of, we went to a refugee camp in Baalbuk, and the refugee camp wasn't big, probably like 600 people, but the land was owned by a landlord, and he was allowing the refugee camp to stay there without paying rent. So he gave the land to the refugees. And then, for example, in the masajid, you have Quran playing out loud 24/7. If it's not Salah time, you have Quran, Mishawi, Abdul Basit, Mustafa Ismail playing on the speakers. You have local, here in the UK we have milkmen dropping milk off. Over there they have fruit people coming to the refugee camps giving out fruit. So the communities are supportive.
Yeah.
That's definitely good to hear. But I think from your guys' perspective, I think it's from a fundraising perspective and giving people like an insight, it's definitely positive for people to go there.
I just have two things to say. I think firstly, the families that are able or comfortable enough to support themselves will more than willingly support a Syrian family. So again, going back to the example of the where I'm from in Lebanon, my uncle, who alhamdulillah is able to support his family comfortably, he's got like a sort of he had like a utility sort of shed / area, a bit bigger than a shed, but he's letting a Syrian family live in there for free, and he employed them to sort of work with him in the house, and he pays them essentially, right? So families are able to do so will, but on the other side, you have families that unfortunately they're literally living like day to day. They are, and families like that, even if they wanted to support, they won't be able to. I was speaking to my cousin today. The minimum wage in Lebanon, firstly, there's no such thing as minimum wage. There's absolutely no law around it. But like subhanallah, she was telling me that her annual income is around £3,000 annual income. Like subhanallah, like some of us earn that much in a month, and to like. Just to think that, and subhanallah, she was so grateful for where she was like, alhamdulillah, I'm fine. She's a teacher, and she's teaching the future generations, and she was content. But you could see that there's a struggle, and Lebanon's quite expensive. It's not one of those countries that you go to and you're like, oh, you don't need much to get by. It's actually quite pricey. So people are really struggling, and those are the people that I said are perhaps feeling a little bit of not resentment, but kind of like they feel like their hands are tied because they can't even support themselves and they can't go out to find a job to support themselves. And unfortunately, the companies that are, because there's no sort of responsibility or accountability for these companies that are employing in such a sort of twisted way. There's nobody telling them you can't do that. So people are doing what they want on a high level. I think
a lot of burden has been put on Lebanon.
Yeah,
because
if you just look at the ratio, like people here complain about, we've got too many immigrants and people are taking their jobs and this, that, the other. From a refugee perspective, we've taken 20,000 per year.
Geographically, how Lebanon is placed in the Middle East, it's actually like.
Yeah, it's a tiny place. It's already under stress. Population density, especially in urban areas, is pretty high. And now you've put in 25% of the country's population.
A volatile government as well.
You've put in 25% of the country's population on top of who you already have. But yeah, that's really insightful to hear from you guys. Jazakumullah khair.
It's the first time Thaqib hasn't spoken for
it's really been enlightening. I threw in the first few questions. I made sure that Sami isn't taking taxpayers' money and running off.
As a woman who wants to volunteer, actually, as a person who wants to volunteer, how do you do it? Are you
saying person because politically
no,
correct?
And secondly, as a woman, how is it? Can you go Can you go and just volunteer as normal? Are they kind of catered for, etc.? How does it work? If you want to get involved with providing aid to the refugee camps, whether in Al or anywhere else.
I don't know about any other organisation, but for UKM, most of the work in terms of giving aid was done by the wing called UKM Relief. The reason I went is because Relief wanted to take someone from youth to Lebanon with them, so I went with them. But essentially, it's most of the time the people who do go, they're not volunteers; they're paid. Salaried people, and once in a while you will take volunteers. It's because some charities do take volunteers, like Penny Appeal, for example. They have their volunteers actually go to so you have crises, you have a tsunami or a flood, they send aid out immediately.
So is it a job that I can apply to?
If you go to the volunteer base, you can speak to them.
Is it? Yeah.
But particularly with Penny, when you're talking about the appeal, those are the only people. They don't have volunteers on the ground, or they don't have enough volunteers on the ground. So these guys are actually going out there and doing.
Yeah, because most of the British charities, although a lot of them do say we have bases in Lebanon, we have bases in Pakistan, most of the time they don't. They have partners in them countries.
Yeah, of course.
So
so they need someone local to go there and.
Yeah.
How is it for human aid then? How does it work? What's the process?
So it's very similar in the sense.
So how do you actually go and apply? You just go on the website.
I want to go. I'm going to Lebanon next year. I want to help. How do I do it?
So. Because I've been a volunteer for a long time, it usually happens with kind of trusted volunteers. I think sometimes they have opportunities that they offer to the volunteers to fundraise a certain amount of money, and as a result of that, you can kind of go ahead to the projects and see them for yourself and see them in action for yourself. Recently, alhamdulillah, they have been expanding slowly, and. But of course, it's a very small charity. So even for example, they have about 5 different projects worldwide, but they all are just working on the ground with local charities that are already existing over there. So it's very, very much similar in that regard.
So were you sort of paid to go, or was it self-funded, or did they fund it? How did it work?
Yeah, so the idea is that if you to raise a certain amount, then that would be kind of subsidized. So they will pay for the trip. But it's only after me raising a certain amount of money. So it wouldn't be from the money that I'd fundraise. That I'd use £400 of it on the flight ticket. They pay from their own budget, but
because that's their fundraising budget or admin costs that they get.
Exactly.
So I didn't fundraise. They sent me there.
So how do they send? Can I apply to go with UKM Relief?
It's like UKM's purely a volunteer-based organisation. The same with MAB. No one's employed, so everyone's a volunteer technically.
Yeah, so if I wanted to go, how do I or if one of the listeners wants to go, how do they get involved?
It's like Abdul Sami said, it's about trust of the organisation. So someone comes in off the street and says, I want to go to Lebanon, it's going to take them to Lebanon, it's expensive, isn't it? So when they have projects going out, because it's like when they need to go Lebanon, they go Lebanon. When they need to go Pakistan, they go. They don't just go for the fun of it, because somebody comes and goes, I want to go Lebanon.
What if I'm happy to fund it?
Yeah, because
if you're happy to fund it, then you speak to the relief team, and then hopefully if you fund it yourself, if it's wholly funded, you can go there and see the projects. So like UKM, for example, have water wells, water pumps, refugee camps. They have schools. They have orphanages. A lot of things you can go see. And
Yeah, because I know with a lot of people who are sending a big amount of money, they're very...
So like when I went, the guy in the... So it was a complex that our partners own a complex. It's quite big. It's very, very nice and neat. And it's like a university complex. But they house a lot of refugees there. And the guy said to me, when you come down again, please come down. You know, we can show you around this and that.
Right.
So they're quite open with it.
I think just one last thing, and I think we should kind of wrap up with this conversation. I think one kind of reflection that really hit me hard was we once met this one person who, prior to the war, he had a motorcycle kind of workshop in a small little village. There was an airstrike that was right next to his garage, and unfortunately he got injured. His face was basically in a really bad condition, unrecognizable. He was blind in both eyes as a result. They did emergency surgery, kind of stitched his face back together. His sight has been restored in one eye. The other eye has been the eyelid has been sewn shut. And basically, we came to the refugee camp at the time of Salat al-Asr. And when we were asking him about day-to-day life, he was like just saying, alhamdulillah, we have this prayer room in this campsite over here, and I just go there now. But the reason why I didn't go pray Asr today was just because you guys were here, so I wanted to speak to you guys. And then we're like, oh, so how about your Quran and your Salah? Like, how do you find that in terms of, are you able to kind of pray comfortably? And then he said, and this is actually a bit shocking for us initially. He was like, oh, when I was in Syria, I did not know how to pray. I did not know how to read the Quran. Because he just wasn't practicing. He was not religious at all. And I was like, wow, you're an Arab and you don't know how to read Arabic? Like these kind of questions just go through your head. And then I thought to myself, subhanAllah, this person's lost a lot of things. He's lost in terms of material. He's lost his job. He's lost maybe certain members of his family. He's lost everything he had in wealth. He's lost almost everything. His lifestyle's completely changed. But the one thing he's gained through all that is a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Throughout all, as a result of everything, before he had no Allah in his life, and now he has, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's praying every day, he's reading Quran every day.
I think the wars brought a lot of the population towards Allah. So like you see in refugee camps as well, everyone's just walking home, it's back in their hand.
Exactly. And it's like, it reminds me of the quote that, if you have, everything in the world, all the materials in the world, all the cars in the world, all the houses in the world, but you don't have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do you really have? And if you have nothing in the world, if you have no houses, no cars, no clothes, no nothing, but you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what have you lost? So it's a really kind of hit me hard, and I think it's something we should be thinking about as well, inshallah.
SubhanAllah, that puts a really deep perspective on it. Obviously, I thought this was going to be a bit shorter, but alhamdulillah, I got really deep, and then we went into a lot of detail. The second topic that we wanted to talk about in this open discussion is New Zealand massacre.
I actually wanted to spin that in a way.
Terrorist attack, yes.
The way I wanted to spin that was actually, of course, alhamdulillah, some Syrian refugees did manage to escape Syria. Some of them managed to get into Europe. Some of them managed to get into New Zealand. And unfortunately...
some of them were killed.
But this is the thing where you can't escape death. So like the Sulaiman alayhi salam story where he was sitting next to a man and then the angel of death came and the guy was like, I'm really uncomfortable here. Can you send me across to this place? And he got the wind or some jinn to take him to that place. And the angel of death goes, hey, I'm supposed to take his life there in like 3 minutes. So thanks for that. I'll be off. So subhanAllah, like your death catches you wherever. I just realised that was a really bad and paraphrased way of telling a story from the...
Cheers.
Yeah.
I bet he didn't say that. I also did a watch checking thing, but I doubt the Angel of Death uses a normal, conventional digital timepiece. But yeah, so New Zealand attack, I think one of the things from my perspective was, and over the past 2 days we've seen, I know there's a positive side to it, but also there's... Like it's still not. I think it's better. The coverage on this has been better than before in that there are some news organizations that are finally openly calling it a terrorist attack. There are some news organizations, and obviously because New Zealand, the MP is sorry, not the Prime Minister, the PM is She's shown real leadership in my opinion, but she's been very open and all that. So it's been quite good, even though I think she first referred to it as a terrorist incident, then deleted a tweet or something.
Yeah, on Twitter it was changed from terrorist attack to act of violence. But to be fair to her, when it was live on live TV, she said it was a terrorist attack.
They went back to, but a lot of people have, because I was on the LBC talk.
So did Netanyahu said it as well, didn't he?
Yeah, which is
But then he killed 15 people in Gaza the same day.
Yeah, which apparently isn't a terrorist attack. So.
But anywho, you're right. I think
but seriously, if you're not calling it a terrorist attack, Netanyahu has better morals than you do.
Unfortunately, let's be honest, with a lot of these political leaders, a lot of it is a facade. Because I think, like we were talking about this today, like I think, MBS and whatnot, they all put up tweets and whatnot. For example, on the BBC today, there was an article that was basically titled the person who, the guy who did the attack in New Zealand, he was a lone wolf. And then, it was literally 2 days after the attack and they've just suddenly just twisted it. And honestly, I think that really aggravated me because the BBC was doing so well up until that point, and they put it down to him being a lone wolf. And he's not a lone wolf. The fact that he had a manifesto where he was referring to white supremacy.
But she emailed to the PM of New Zealand.
I didn't know that.
Oh wow! So
yeah, she found out.
On the day he was going to carry on the attack, he sent the manifesto to the PM.
So this is the thing.
She of course found out after the attack was actually done.
Yeah, but why? Why didn't someone monitor that? Because if this was a Muslim guy,
that's the question. So that's the question about how are we actually monitoring extremism?
Are so targeted at even though apparently. So I was looking at the numbers for this. In 2018, all of the murders done had a far right link.
Yeah.
And I think Sheikh Yasser Qadi posted up something like that. And it's just not on. Like
it's the past year in America, every single terrorist incident's been far right.
I think this is genuinely a time we have to call out many things. First and foremost, calling out the media in terms of the unfair portrayal and biased portrayal of the whole incident. In fact, as Lena mentioned, the BBC article that had mentioned that he was a lone wolf. On top of that, I think it was the Daily Mirror that recently, a couple of days ago, published a paper.
The angelic boy or blue-eyed boy.
That was comical, genuinely.
And I just thought, do you remember when Asim Qureshi from Cage, when he described Jihadi John as a beautiful young man before he was radicalized?
Yes.
And then he was ridiculed. He was given all sorts of abuse by literally everybody, left, right, and center.
This is literally what they did.
Exactly the same thing, but.
And his dad died of cancer, so therefore, you're humanizing
a terrorist.
The terrorist, not the people who died.
Exactly. And this is why, first and foremost, you have to call out the media for their unfair portrayal. And I think the one reason why we have, alhamdulillah, people who have been recognized as a terrorist attack is because, mashallah, a lot of Islamic organizations have been really pushing really hard recently. Yourself, Thaqib, mashallah, you were on the LBC the other day, weren't you?
Oh, wow. Plug for myself. But a lot of organizations. So
yeah,
I mean, MAB have been doing this. So we had a few interviews, including the one I had on LBC, and even MCB did. So I think Mr. Versi was on. I think yesterday morning, talking about this, and he pointed that out.
We also had the Muslim Council of Scotland doing quite a few interviews with BBC Scotland. We also had...
Oh, wow. So Muslim Council of Scotland is independent of Muslim Council of Britain?
No, they're an affiliate of MCB.
Oh, wow. So, okay. Very interesting.
So, yeah, it's...
Freedom.
Very nice. So, for all the Scots who want to be part of the UK, there's hope. Anywho, but also the East London Mosque were doing... they held a vigil where they invited
with
the mayor...
With
Sadiq Khan, with MCB as well, so Brother Harun, as well as... one of the archbishops as well around the area. So they had they responded really well in terms of media, in terms of the messaging really did get out there where this was a terrorist attack and there's no taking away from it. And the victims,
which is so much better than previous times.
Yeah, I think it's improved a lot.
But also I think in terms of we've been getting a lot of messages. So at MAB and the local mosque in Birmingham, we've been getting our next door to us is a swimming baths. And they sent us a letter saying, Our thoughts or prayers are with you in this time. People like even in Solihull, like a guy came to the local Jummah and he came like with a "We are sorry" board, which I found very interesting because this is he's basically apologizing,
Exactly.
which is what they expect us to do. But he's actually
Something which the
doing it, so
Muslimics should be doing, apparently.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like he didn't need to do that, but it just made me feel like he felt the pressure to say we're sorry. Like I get if you say we're your friends or we stand with you or something. It's like, dude,
I think we're arguing that the media improved its coverage about this attack. However, I've seen a lot of outrage, and myself included, I've been quite annoyed at the fact that a lot of non-Muslim friends have not been as vocal about this attack as they have been
but they might
about
not
previous
have heard it,
attacks.
But they genuinely might not have heard about it.
But people that
Like, where's my Facebook cover photo change thing?
Exactly.
No. But I mean the people that, for example, are on your social media that are seeing that because if you are vocal on social media, which I feel that we should all be, if we are active users of social media, and if we've spoken about about the previous attacks, why not raise awareness about this? That's A. And secondly, if I've got you on my social media account, you are seeing that we are, as a Muslim community, are mourning. And if this whole selective mourning where people change their profile pictures for Charlie Hebdo and hashtags and the B for the Manchester B and things like that, we I think as a community we should you can't selectively mourn terrorist attacks. You can't do it. And I think people, although the media perhaps have been doing a slightly better job, if not, I think actually the Muslims are doing a better job actually. When it comes to social media and just your community around you, they need to be feeling it just as much as we are. And that's why I was kind of.
I think we're focusing it's good to focus on the attack being an effect of the media, etc. Stuff like that. But I think we need to focus on solutions.
Yeah, I think.
I think a lot of the stuff with coming together. So like people have been like, I feel like that's what we need to do as a community. We need to stand together and challenge this sort of rhetoric kind of robustly, because there'll always be some people out there who are kind of.
We have to understand is the idea of Islamophobia, for example. It hasn't risen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So we're talking about media, etc.
That's the thing. So
no, but the thing is, it hasn't been out of a vacuum exactly. But fascists have always had a target. So in the 30s, it was
like I said. Yeah, I was talking to someone before, and I said Islamophobia is the discernible effect of 20 years, 2 decades of scapegoating rhetoric from the media. Yeah. But it's always been like that towards one group or another. So in the 80s, we had the fall of the Soviet bloc, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Before that, the communists were the target. So we had attacks. Well, we had US-led aggression in South America, where the Americans would prop up regimes that were anti-communist, rebel militias. The contrast in Nicaragua, and then you have the Cold War, for example, and you have this kind of sentiment brewing in America and around the world as well of anti-communism. There was I think a couple of months ago, Karl Marx's statue in London was not destroyed. They vandalized it. Murderer, this and that, saying what Stalin did was because of Karl Marx. Then, soon as the Berlin Wall fell, a new target's become apparent. It's Islam.
That, but also, I think in Britain in particular, I think fascists targeted the Jews first, and then there's a lot of anti-Irish rhetoric that the media built up.
Well, that's British. If you want to focus on Britain,
that's very British focus.
Yeah, if you want to focus on Britain, then you talk about the IRA.
Because Europe-wide, I agree with you. It was or kind of even the global West. But
just one thing is that just touch on one thing that Nina mentioned in terms of when it came to the media side of things, there was no same kind of hype in terms of where was my Charlie Hebdo kind of style of cover photo, where were the hashtags and all this. And I think, make no mistake, even though we were talking about how these attacks have been recognized as terrorist attacks, make no mistake, the media didn't do a good job at all. It wasn't the media who did this. It was the Muslim organizations who did this.
Who kind of took control, yeah.
They took control, and they kind of took, they reclaimed the narrative in that sense. And
I did find that even some of the things that, obviously I'm not trying to be a nitpicker, he says before nitpicking, but like, the They Are Us statement, the They Are Us campaign, that I was like, yeah, but who's they? Like, why are we they? Why are they? Why is they are us?
Hmm.
Like it should be,
No.
we are New Zealand or we are all Kiwis or
Exactly.
something like that. Because it's so. When I was on the interview, one of the questions I got asked was basically the last question he kind of threw that in there was a lot of the extremism has been from your community, and I basically got triggered. I went off I had a scripted answer, but I went off on I just went off on a rant about how, because at the start of even his show, he called it mass shooting, and I was just triggered. But actually, he said your community, and I should have said something. I could have said many things, but one of them could have been, what do you mean my community, mate? You're part of my community, because are you saying that British Muslims are less British than you? Or
Yeah, it's feeding into the narrative of us and them. But I feel that the context in which the Prime Minister said it was a little bit different, because I think there was already that rhetoric that the Muslims were attacked. So she's trying to say that no, actually
it's not
we're one
Muslims.
community.
Yeah, exactly.
So she was kind of going off that, what was already there, and what everybody was already thinking in New Zealand at the time. But generally, in the context in which you were asked it, I felt like it was very very right wing. It was that, I think that was just. Definitely sort of feeding into that divide, 100%.
And to speak about what Asad was also mentioning in terms of how Islamophobia is basically like the new scapegoats, and Muslims are treated like that. Unfortunately, the response, yes, it was nice to see the response in terms of the all communities coming together, the flowers at the mosques, or even around the world, you had people coming up to mosques and offering their condolences. But
unless they came up in a black Ford Fiesta in Birmingham and then tried to throw things. There was like an altercation between it's basically some guys at the masjid chased them away, and it was quite one of them got hurt in the head, and then the way they drove off, one of them had to jump on the hood.
That's really unfortunate. And the thing is, even though that was all good in terms of the response from the international community, unfortunately, that's not exactly what we want. Because yes, it's nice on a short-term level.
What do you want?
That's
Change.
the thing. What we really want, what we really need to see, is that Islamophobia is real. Islamophobia is not just a myth that people are saying that people are trying to rubbish. It's an issue that's affecting people every single day.
Is that our end game? Okay,
What is our end game?
So here's the thing: we don't ask for our politicians to stand in solidarity when these attacks happen, but to deal with the issue at hand, which is a violation of human rights, essentially speaking. When a hijabi is discriminated at work, when a niqabi is abused on the streets, when she has a niqab ripped off her, when a man with a beard is attacked on his way to Fajr prayer, these are all violations of human rights, and that's what our politicians need to now address. Our politicians, EU institutions need to start addressing these. Our politicians need to start addressing these from a proactive approach. Islamophobia is unfortunately killing people, and it should have never come to this, where 49 people went to pray Jum'ah and never came back.
Of course, it shouldn't have come to this. That's a pretty obvious thing to say. But where are we going to go from now?
Yeah, so what are the positive steps that we can, I guess, so I think Islamophobia is true, but I think part of it is, as Muslim communities, we need to focus on, I feel like we focus a lot on Muslim-specific issues, so a lot of the campaigning one of the most successful campaigning bits was done by MEND, but their 10 points were all to do with Islamophobia and reducing discrimination and all those things, which are all really important. But also, what about the NHS, which affects everybody? And I feel like we need to focus on wider British issues as well, because it's a two-way street. Once we break out of our own, because what we're effectively saying is that the problem with this really is that we need to be treated as equal citizens in Britain.
Yeah, of course.
And that's it. And that applies to everything. So once you're treated as an equal citizen, there's no Islamophobia, there's no anything. But there a couple of things I think Daniel Hakikaju mentioned this, is that the route we seem to be taking towards, especially in terms of representation and stuff, is there's communities like the Japanese Americans or the Chinese Americans, etc., who don't have as much political power, etc., but they don't seem like they seem to be completely accepted and integrated into society.
But at one point they weren't, though.
Yeah, but did they follow the same route we did? Because they didn't go through all these political campaigning and stuff.
The Japanese, for example, after World War II, there was no activism from the Japanese side. The civil rights movement was mainly black. I'm not going to say in a derogatory way, but the Japanese the Japanese community kind of was slightly parasitic on the civil rights movement. It was mainly a black movement, but the effects of the movement were that Japanese got rights as well, because they were a minority.
They were a minority.
But the vast majority of the activism was from the black community. So I don't really think that the Japanese are a good example.
The thing is that the other thing you have to argue is also the when the right wing come at Muslims and they try and scapegoat Muslims for all the problems, which by the way ultimately, and it's a massive side topic. Ultimately, it's an issue of social class. It's an issue of and that's why it actually boils down to when you remove all the covers. But going back to the issue, like when
you say social class, so are you kind of saying that it's more of a rich poor divide, or it's like socioeconomic class, or?
So a bit more of a kind of socio-economic kind of problem, but that's like another kind of conversation.
So as in, like, too many Muslims are working class and we need to all get richer.
No, not that. The sense that when you look at the root of the problems of why these people are actually suffering from why do these guys actually hate Muslims for? Because they believe that Muslims are taking all these jobs, or these immigrants are taking all these jobs, and that's not really the case. When you have the government that's currently taking away all the making all these cuts to social benefits, when you see disabled people getting cuts in their benefits, when you see universal basic credit kind of slashing a lot of the kind of social needs of a lot of these people, they're going to start blaming somebody at least.
It's a scapegoat, isn't it?
Exactly. So that's the underlying thing incomplete. But anywho, going back to the issue of when the right wing do actually come at Muslims and target Muslims, the biggest thing that they accuse Muslims of is the fact that you're not assimilating, and that's a bigger question as well. That we need to understand.
Well, to be honest with the New Zealand attacker, he was arguing about assimilating. If you read his memo, I actually read it, and he went to Pakistan that earlier year.
Yeah, but also
I saw a picture of that. What's the story behind that?
So the story is he went backpacking. He was a personal trainer at a gym in Australia. After that, he left his job. He went backpacking around Asia, and he loved it. He loved the cultures. He said the people are amazing. He goes, the problem is they're amazing in their own countries.
Yeah, but the other thing, he said the people he hates the most are white converts to Islam. Or like we call them reverts all the time, but he hates them more than anything.
He's very strict on the idea of the nation state. So
for
you're Pakistani, you should never step outside of Pakistan.
He was inspired by is it the replacement theory or something like that?
Yeah,
the fact that there's a book that was written about how the author basically his theory was that brown people or people of color are replacing, or immigrants are replacing white people, and
basically,
so it is white supremacy.
That was the main idea.
That's the threat.
But also the Clash of Nations thing. I feel like a lot of Muslims on the complete other side have the same view, which is like you can never be friendly with Jews and Christians because لن ترضى عنك اليهود ولا النصارى حتى تتبع ملتهم. They won't be happy with you until you, or they won't be accepting of you until you follow their religion, or follow their millah, which is a bit more I'm taking liberties with the translation here, as I did with the hadith narration before. But anyway, that point that a lot of Muslims make as well is that we can never truly assimilate because. Well,
and the thing is that the point is never about assimilation. When you assimilate, that's when you start losing culture, and that's when everybody starts becoming more uniform. And the reality is, the most beautiful thing about being in the Western world, being in America, being in the UK, is the fact that there's so much diversity. And I hate to be very cliche about this, but genuinely, it's through our diversity that we actually prosper. It's through our diversity that we actually explore our minds and become more open-minded as human beings.
Got Sadiq Khan on the podcast.
Sorry,
you watched the video of Sadiq Khan when he came out and he goes, our diversity is our strongest asset.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said on mosque. I happened to be there as well. But,
were you?
I was there. Yeah,
I watched the thing with the was it a bishop or the lady one?
Yeah, the bishop. Yeah. And she was saying, and this is very interesting. I loved what she said. She said that an attack on any religion is an attack on all religions.
So one of the things some of the guys said was that if you consider nationalism your only religion, or which is in theory what fascists are doing, it's like a very hardcore form of nationalism, then in theory you're going to go after any religion that does anything past your nation state. So if you're Christian, you're supposed to have loyalty to other Christians as well, and we've seen with fascists, like they don't just hate Muslims, but they hate Muslims a bit more because most of us are brown. Which, by the way, is a whole other problem. Like, you know, why are we a majority migrant community, and what can we do to present, like, or what are we doing wrong?
So multi-layered, isn't it?
People are, But also they hate they hate Eastern Europeans who come to this country.
Having said that, even though they hate Eastern Europeans, maybe perhaps, and why a lot of people did vote for Brexit, or because these Romanians are coming over and taking our jobs, or these Polish people, the underlying factor is, you know, those who are nationalists to these countries, they absolutely adore them, and they have, you know, it's like they found some sort of a brotherhood with these kind of people. So, for example,
What do you mean these countries?
So, for example, the killer, whilst on his way to the mosque, he was listening to a speech by Karadzic.
Yeah. So I agree with you. A lot of Eastern European countries have their own fascism.
Exactly.
But I feel like that's so. It's a bit like, yes, a lot of them do a lot of work together. But
just for the listeners who don't know who Karadzic is, so his name is Radovan Karadzic. He was one of the people who's tried for war crimes in the acts of the genocide in Srebrenica, and so he's someone who's just very much pro-Serbian kind of nationalist, who had the sick mentality of cleansing out Bosnia from all the Muslims that they had. His kind of vision was to see the streets of Srebrenica completely red in the blood of Muslims. And this is the kind of people that, unfortunately, the right wing are listening to and are being radicalized by this. And that actually goes on to another discussion point, which is, should our security, you know, our counterterrorism policies, unfortunately, are shaped in such a way where a lot of the monitoring happens to be, you know, the surveillance happens to be very focused on Muslims. And yet, this, you know, the secret services could not have tracked down this person here who was planning this attack for 2 years. 2 years ago, he had the idea. For the past 3 months, he was working on it extremely hard. Could the the secret services, could they have?
He sent an email to the Prime Minister's inbox. That's like,
I think with the issue of the former Yugoslavia, so the conflict with fascism in Eastern Europe is completely different too. I think personally, because the complexities of fascism in Serbia and Srebrenica and stuff like that, it's much more deeply rooted in culture. So the divide was for example, you got the divide in Bosnia was because of the Albanian Muslims, the minority of the Albanians, and you can see it in when for example, this person, what's he called again? He was tried for war crimes.
Yeah.
But the first person to be tried for war crimes in front of the tribunal for former Yugoslavia wasn't a general. It wasn't a big guy like this. Like I said before, it was a guy called Tadic. He's a small town general who committed torture in some prison somewhere.
I doubt very much that. I mean, maybe he could, but I don't think they appreciate the nuance of it. So, for example, some of the things that like he had a 14th century Serbian knight's name on his rifle. It's not rational really, because that's a completely different context. If you actually contextualize it doesn't make any sense. But that's the whole point of Islamophobia is very irrational.
Yeah, but
because sometimes they go after Sikh people because they're brown.
It's funny, like we speak about this very seriously, but the guy, I forgot his name, Brenton Tarrant or something.
That's it.
Yeah.
He wasn't serious when he did this. The attack wasn't serious, so he was part of 8chan forums and 4chan forums, and so like just before he got in the car, he was like subscribed to PewDiePie. The reason he said that was because PewDiePie is currently in like a subscriber race with Indian channel called T-Series, you know, the music company T-Series, and they're battling for 89 million subscribers, and it's been like a battle between PewDiePie and he said it as a meme. It was a meme, and the entire thing was a meme, because if you read his manifesto and what he said to the community online in the 4chan forum, it was like, okay, broskies, I'm going to go and actually do what I got to do for this cause. If you don't see me, then tell Jesus I love him, this and that. Just jokes. It was jokes. Talking about spaghetti monster, stuff like that. It was a meme. And we're talking about this very seriously over a podcast.
What do you mean it was a joke?
It was a meme. The entire thing.
As in he wasn't like...
He was very influenced by the meme culture. So so for example...
What do you mean by that?
So online, there's something called meme culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. We see...
know that.
No, you don't know that, because I was just talking about something before. We see probably the tip of the iceberg. underneath the water, there was a complete different community. And I've been, for a small part of time, I was in part of that community, and I've seen stuff that you do not want to... I don't want to say in this podcast, because the community down there, in terms of these 4chan forums that nobody knows of, these private groups on Facebook that are closed and invite only, is completely different to what you see outside in terms of memes.
Go on, so how do they differ?
There's some, for example, there's some liberal forums of former Muslims. It's called Liberal Muslims United, something. I forgot what it's called. It's on 4chan. Mocking the attack with memes. Not in terms of memes of like you see of trends going on Twitter, etc.
When you say memes, I literally imagine like all these like cartoon
because
stuff
I follow a couple of
and
pages like
text.
that.
Is that literally the same thing?
I don't get what your point to that is. Is that, are you saying that he wasn't influenced by mainstream Islam?
No, I'm saying he was, but I'm saying in his head it was completely different, because he was acting on behalf of that community. He said, all right, guys, I'm going out. I'm going to finally do this. You guys have my back. If you don't hear from me, I'm probably dead and with Jesus, blah, 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 blah.
But saying that, a lot of those people probably didn't have his back.
They didn't know, but they pushed it.
As in, yeah, because...
His memo was shared thousands of times before the attack took place on 4chan.
Really?
Yeah.
How soon before?
I think he released his
Yeah,
memo
but
the day before
how many of these people were
And
sharing
the fact
it?
that wasn't picked
So
up.
you're saying a lot of those people
most
shared it as a
shocking thing.
joke rather than
No,
actually
they know
seriously-
they know it's real, but they treat it as a joke.
It's a bit like the video game culture, where you're so engrossed in one thing, it becomes a different world.
It becomes
and
reality for you.
his attack was literally like a video game,
Basically.
you know? So
You
I
know,
think
so when
probably
he
the same
when he
sort
appeared in
of...
court, the newspaper said he threw up a white
Yes.
supremacist. That wasn't a white supremacist.
What was
symbol.
that then?
That is a meme. If you look at this, that means I get to punch you. Have you seen them?
Yeah, but that's taken from... So if you...
He's killed 40.
If you go back on Wikipedia for this, there's some detail about it, which was talking about how what it originally started off as, and then in 2017, because I remember
it's a
that you
meme.
get to put someone if it's... yeah.
So we're looking at his
Minded
white
them.
supremacist thing, blah blah blah, and he's in his head. He's thinking, all right then, cameras on me. I've killed 49 people.
Right.
And what's the thing he's going to do when he comes
Also,
on
by the
camera?
way, his arms are...
So
just
what's
complete
this?
distraction.
It's like if you look at
You get to punt it. If you see it, you get to punt someone. So that's how we used to use it, that same symbol.
What's
Boys being boys, basically.
Boys being boys. If you can do it under your waist and someone sees... So I'll say to you, hey Lena, look, and then I'll do this, and you'll look down at my hand and I'll get to punch you. And we used to do it quite commonly. It's very stupid, actually, if you think about it.
I still do it.
What I also saw was how hench he was, like his arms
He
were...
was
Well, he's a
big.
personal
But
trainer.
by the way, on the family, when someone shared it, like on my family group, I actually thought that guy was just sharing it so they could get to punch me because I opened the picture. But then actually,
It's
I saw
amazing.
the explanation.
No, but there is a background
There is
to
a background.
it in white
There's a
supremacy.
background.
So I feel like there's a lot of
White supremacy.
irony that he's
So
playing
I'm sure
with.
he's doing both, which again makes you think he's actually more intelligent of a guy than maybe we...
He's just on the
know
internet
it.
for too long, is what basically what it is.
He was an incel. That's what they called him. And Daniel Hikiju called him an incel as well.
But sorry, coming back to that point about, we said about fascism and stuff like that. A lot of the... Because at the moment it's Islamophobia, which was, in the 70s and 80s was basically Paki bashing. But I feel a lot of the time that when these people come up to you and say, your God is this and that, they're not coming with you to debate theology. They're coming at you because they know they can't say Paki. So, and you're brown, so... They come at you with because on that show the one where the Muslims all lived together and there was a
Muslims like us.
and there was
Muslims like us.
and the comedian guy Nabil
Yes.
was talking about racism and the convert Muslim lady, she just didn't get it because she was like, this is an Islam-wide thing, and he was saying this is a race-wide thing, and some of that conversation was about who faces abuse, because if you see a woman walking
Even
down...
Nabil personally, I know him personally. I've been on tour with the guy. He's completely on one side. So he's like, he calls people who are Pakistanis who disagree with him Bani Ganesh. It's quite funny to be honest with you. Yeah.
I mean,
But
everyone's
whatever,
got the
I'm
tendencies.
just talking about the point. So,
But back to the point. I said solution.
What was the point?
Yes, you did-
So
you
I
did
mean,
say-
I mean,
Well,
just,
you
just
went off
before
on some random meme
Solution to
points.
what
Wait,
problem?
the
Just to be
solution
very,
is
very clear.
It's just
To the problem of Islamophobia.
so
Okay,
just,
to
just
Islamophobia.
I think just to bring it back to the conversation on New Zealand, first and foremost, there's a few positive things that I had seen on social media as a response to it. There was a hashtag My Mosque campaign, which some people were doing. The idea was some people who had attended Jummah that day, they took pictures from the mosque and just kind of did the motivational quotes talking about, this is my mosque, this is what it means to me, and, no white supremacist will stop me from going to Jummah prayers.
That mosque did Salat al-Asr. The mosque where 41 people died. A few hours later, they were like, you know what? Salah, this is a masjid. We ain't going to stop praying.
And,
See, so for example, I'm sorry, what did you say? So they're doing like My Mosque Day.
So, no.
Just hashtag my
So
mosque.
Hashtag My Mosque.
a hashtag My Mosque.
That's nice and all. It's nice. It gets a bit of publicity. People get to see that,
the
Muslims are
Andrew
together.
Seneca's-
No, but isn't that what we need though? Like, for example, the fact that sorry, carry on.
No. It's actually okay. I'll go to you just after one more thing I wanted to mention actually, and that is the victims. Some of them were amazing people. We had a woman by the name of Hasna Parveen. She was 42. She was shot when she tried to save her husband, who was wheelchair bound, and another person. He was a 71-year-old Uncle G. He ran the.
But with Shuhada, we always find stuff like this. So even with Rabi'a, a couple of people that I've heard talk about this, like Sheikh, they've said that it felt like the people who, because being a shaheed is a very big thing, and in terms of the reward, etc. But they've often said that it felt like the bullets targeted the best of the people to get this.
Yeah.
But yeah, going on to solutions
So,
before we wrap up.
the first thing is that first and foremost, what we should be trying to do is first and foremost get to know who these people were. If we can, there's lots of information that has been released. Start spreading the information about some of these people.
Can I make a quick shout out?
How does that get us to the solution?
So first and foremost,
Sorry.
I just wanted to make a quick shout out. Actually, I'll be allowed
Go
to do
ahead.
that. Instagrammers, etc.
Go
There's a Twitter and Instagram account by Khalid Baidoun, and he's actually sharing. He's an author and law professor.
But he's
And-
also going to be Bernie Sanders' campaign manager or something? Is that the same guy?
I don't know, to be honest, but the reason I'm saying his account is because he's actually shared the stories of each of the victims, and I was reading them out to my mum today, and it was just, again, it's heartwarming, and also actually you can connect with their stories, and when you are making dua for them, you can make them more specific.
Precisely. So let's, enough about this guy Brent, whatever his name was.
Yeah.
Let's start talking about the people who.
No, but let's also talk about.
We can talk about the
solutions,
people, but what we need to focus on is the solutions, because the effect of all of this was the people dying in the first place.
I feel like this is another podcast. The solution to
Yeah.
Islamophobia.
You know what?
It's quite a broad question, but it's
One big solution for sure is, guys, wake up, okay? These people, these right-wing extremists, these white supremacists, when they look at Muslims, they don't look at Muslims as these are the Ikhwanis, these are the Tablighis, these are the Salafis, these are the such and such.
Well, also
They look at everyone as Muslim.
Yeah, but wider than that, sometimes they don't look at Muslims as Muslims. They just go, brown person.
so. Like we say that there's a lot of sectarianism within our communities, but when it comes to the crunch, we do unite. I think
We
That's
do,
not a
we
problem.
do,
Definitely,
which was
It's
amazing.
not a problem.
and everybody was talking. So
Exactly.
there was a apparently there was a guy who used to be part of Dawat Islami in Karachi, which is the biggest movement of Brelwis, and he was one of the people who shot. And it's kind of, that's something that everybody goes to Jummah, man. No matter what you're like, people come together for Jummah.
Historically as well. So Ibn Taymiyyah uniting with the Ash'ara, for example, he spent his entire life refuting them. But when it comes to the
But
crunch,
when it comes to the crunch,
but I'm going to put this in there at the last minute. For solutions, it's quite a broad question. For example, so we're talking about Islamophobia. What's the solution? You write books on it. You can write papers on it, for example. But we need to look at, do we suit the environment first and foremost in the West, and should we assume that we can build fantastic lives for ourselves as Muslims? Can Islam have a place in the West, for example? And these are the questions we need to be asking ourselves. So for groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir, Khalaf ala minhaj an-nubuwah, these people say that from 1924 onwards, you've taken the fish out of its pond. The Muslims, you've taken them out of the environment, and an effect of this is you're not going to be able to assimilate. You're not going to be able to fully assimilate.
Yeah. So this is what I was saying, that a lot of Muslims actually say that there's no way that the West is a final home for us.
Well, it's not.
For
My
Muslims.
personal opinion, it might be controversial to end the podcast, but my personal opinion is not. And I think seriously, we're looking at this as a tragedy, and it should be looked as a tragedy, not only for the victims but also for the ummah, because we still haven't opened our eyes to the fact that we're not home yet.
Why not?
Why we're not home? Because Thaqib just moved my cup because I was making a sound in my cup.
We should, you know what we should do? We should end off with those. What's those noises called? You know, when you drink something.
ASMR.
A cliffhanger, and then just like slurp your coffee.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
That can be our jingle, just eating nuts.
No, because this is
Exactly.
definitely another
And then start off part
another
2
discussion.
to this, because
But yeah, definitely we need to bring a guest, and to the, you know what, yeah, to the guests. Before Asad says anything really controversial and gets himself in trouble, because we know that, you know, we've talked about how, you know, his family have threatened him before. But anyway, moving swiftly on. So if you do have a guest who can discuss Islamophobia with us on the next episode, please let us know. We have a few excellent episodes planned. Some of those topics will be on there, and we'll also be trying to get other activists, scholars, people who in the community who've done positive stuff from around the UK, and trying to go to different cities and destinations. This has been a really good roundtable. Alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khair to everyone for joining in. Our email address is middlewestpc@gmail.com. Our Facebook page is The Middle West, youtube.com/The Middle West. Our Twitter is @The Middle West, and
PC.
at the Middle West PC. And last but not least, you can listen to us on various different things. So on your local podcast app, on YouTube, and iTunes, like iTunes
Spotify.
podcast, rate us 5 out of 5.
I listen on
Spotify
iTunes.
as well. Yeah, but that's because you chose Apple over Islam. So, anyways, with that, jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.